The emergency alarms echoed through the crystal halls of Nexus. Prime as representatives from 7 different alien species hurried toward the council chamber. Their faces showed fear and desperation that had become all too familiar in recent months. The Vorthan Empire was winning, and everyone knew it. High Chancellor Vexstar stood at the center of the great circular room, his blue-scaled skin darker than usual under the stress. Around him sat the other leaders of the Zephyrian Confederation beings, who had once believed their peaceful alliance could solve any problem through diplomacy and cooperation. Now they faced an enemy that understood only violence. Reports are worse than we feared, Vexstar announced, his voice heavy with defeat. The Vorthans have taken 3 more colonies this week: Kepler 7, New Haven, and the mining stations around Proxima Delta. That makes 47 worlds lost in just 6 months. Counselor Miradon of the Helix Collective shifted nervously. In her seat, her people were known for their advanced technology and peaceful nature. But even their most sophisticated weapons had proven useless against Vorthon brutality. "How many refugees this time?" she asked quietly. "None," replied Commander Blixera, his mechanical voice lacking any emotion. "The Vorthines don't take prisoners anymore. They've decided it's more efficient to eliminate entire populations and start fresh with their own colonists." The room fell silent. Everyone had heard the stories from the few survivors who had managed to escape Vorthon attacks. The Empire didn't just conquer worlds, they erased every trace of the civilizations that had lived there before. Entire species had vanished from the galaxy, their cultures and histories destroyed forever. Vexstar activated the holographic display in the center of the room. The map showed the current state of the galaxy, with Vorthon-controlled territory, marked in ominous red. The crimson areas covered nearly half of known space, and the red zones were growing larger every day. "They're not just expanding randomly," observed Dr. Kelshawn from the Science Coalition. "Look at the pattern. They're targeting strategic worlds, trade routes, resource reach systems, and defensive positions. Within a year, they'll have surrounded our core worlds completely." "We've tried everything," said Miradon, her voice breaking slightly. "Diplomatic missions, peace offerings, even tribute payments. Nothing works. They want total conquest, and they won't stop until they have it." The Confederation had been formed 2 centuries ago by species who believed that cooperation and understanding could solve any conflict. They had built hospitals instead of battleships, schools instead of weapons factories, and art galleries. Instead of military bases, their greatest achievement had been eliminating war from their territories entirely. Now that peaceful nature was about to get them all killed. "What about the Galactic Defense Network?" asked one of the younger representatives. "Surely they'll intervene if an entire confederation is threatened." Commander Blixera's mechanical form buzzed with what might have been laughter. The Defense Network disbanded last year. Too many member species were afraid of provoking the Vorthons. They decided it was better to stay neutral and hope the Empire would leave them alone. "And the other major powers?" pressed another voice from the crowd. "The Stellar Republic is too far away and too busy with their own border conflicts. The Trade Federation has already signed non-aggression pacts with the Vorthans. The Mystic Orders claim this is all part of some cosmic balance that shouldn't be interfered with." Vexstar's voice grew bitter. "We're alone." The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Outside the great windows, the stars looked the same as always. But everyone knew that many of those distant lights now shone down on worlds where the Vorthans ruled with absolute terror. "Then we send out the call," declared Counselor Miradon. Suddenly, to every species, every civilization that might listen, we ask for help from anyone willing to stand against the Empire. "Who would answer?" asked Dr. Kelshawn. "If the major powers won't help us, why would smaller species risk Vorthon?" "Retaliation? Because some beings still believe in justice?" Miradon replied firmly. "Because somewhere out there might be a species that remembers what it means to stand up to bullies, even when the odds are impossible." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the Confederation's most powerful transmitters were broadcasting an emergency message across known space. The signal carried their desperate plea in dozens of languages, reaching every corner of the galaxy where intelligent life might exist. Most of the responses came quickly and were depressingly similar. Polite refusals, expressions of sympathy, and carefully worded explanations of why direct military assistance was impossible. The Vorthines were too powerful, too ruthless, and too willing to punish anyone who opposed them. But then, 3 days after the broadcast, something unexpected happened. A simple message arrived from a small blue world in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy. The species called themselves humans, and their response was just 2 words: "We'll help." Nobody had ever heard of them before. Their location was in a sector marked as primitive on most star charts. But they had answered the call when no one else would, and desperation made the Confederation willing to accept help from anyone. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous allies come in the most unexpected packages. The transport shuttle descended through the crystalline atmosphere of Nexus Prime, its hull scratched and dented from what appeared to be countless journeys through space. Watching from the observation deck, High Chancellor Vexstar couldn't hide his disappointment. The human vessel looked ancient compared to Confederation technology, its design simple and functional rather than elegant. "That's their diplomatic ship?" whispered Counselor Miradon, her tentacles curling with nervous energy. "It looks like a cargo hauler." Commander Blixerus' mechanical sensors analyzed the approaching craft. Primitive fusion drive, basic shielding, minimal weapons. Their technology appears to be several centuries behind our own. The shuttle landed with a heavy thud on the diplomatic platform, its engines coughing black smoke before finally shutting down. The gathered alien dignitaries exchanged worried glances. They had hoped for powerful allies, but what they were getting looked more like refugees. The airlock hissed open, and the humans emerged. Ambassador Ginwu stepped forward first, a middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform without any decorations or signs of rank. Behind him came Minister Hajin, a woman with sharp features and alert eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," Vexstar said formally, though his voice lacked enthusiasm. "We are grateful that you answered our call for help." Jinwu smiled warmly and bowed slightly. "We are honored to be here. Humanity has always believed that peaceful beings should not face extinction alone." The other humans in the group looked equally ordinary. They were shorter than most of the alien species present, with no visible natural weapons or armor. Their skin looked soft and vulnerable, and they moved with what appeared to be casual confidence rather than military precision. "How many ships did you bring?" asked Commander Blixera bluntly. "Just the one transport," replied Hygiene. "Our main fleet is waiting in the outer system." "Your main fleet?" Miradon's voice rose hopefully. "How many vessels?" "Enough," Jinwu said simply. The humans were escorted to guest quarters, while the Confederation leadership gathered for an emergency meeting. The mood in the council chamber was grim. "This is what we get for our desperate plea," groaned Dr. Kelshawn. "A handful of primitives, with outdated technology and mysterious answers." "At least they came," Vexstar pointed out, though he didn't sound convinced himself. "Everyone else ignored us or refused outright." Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Warthan intelligence officers were intercepting and analyzing the communications from Nexus Prime. The news of the human arrival had spread quickly through Confederation networks, and the Warthans were always listening. Commander Vexmore studied the intercepted data from his massive dreadnought. The Vorthan was enormous, even by his species standards, with battle scars covering his armored hide and cold yellow eyes that had witnessed the destruction of countless worlds. "Humans?" he growled to his tactical officer. "Never heard of them." "What do our databases show?" "Very little, Commander. They appear to be a minor species from the galaxy's outer rim. There's no significant military presence, no advanced technology, no previous contact with major civilizations." Dexmore's laugh was like grinding metal. Confederation is so desperate. They're accepting help from complete unknowns. "This is even more pathetic than I expected." His subordinates joined in the laughter. The Vorthans had conquered half the galaxy through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. They had faced species with advanced technology, natural weapons, and centuries of military experience. All had fallen before the Empire's might. "Should we adjust our attack plans?" asked the tactical officer. "Why bother?" Dexmore replied dismissively. A few primitive ships won't change the outcome. We'll crush them along with the rest of the Confederation and make an example of anyone foolish enough to oppose us. Back on Nexus Prime, the humans were being given a tour of the Confederation's military facilities. Jinwoo and his team observed everything with polite interest, asking seemingly innocent questions about defensive strategies and fleet positions. Our main problem is mobility, explained General Vic Stone, the Confederation's military commander. Vorthan ships are faster than ours, and they can strike anywhere along our border before we can respond. They prefer direct assault tactics, asked Haijin casually. Always. Overwhelming force applied at the point of maximum vulnerability. They never attempt deception or complex strategies because they don't need to. The humans exchanged glances, but their expressions remained neutral. They thanked their hosts for the information and retired to their quarters for the evening. That night, as the aliens of Nexus Prime slept, the humans held a quiet meeting in their rooms. Jinwoo activated a small device that would prevent electronic surveillance, and the team's demeanor changed completely. Assessment, he asked quietly. The Confederation is exactly as weak as reported, Haijin replied. Good people, but they've never faced a real threat. They're thinking like victims instead of warriors. And the Vorthines. Predictable, arrogant. They rely on brute force and intimidation because it's always worked before. They've never faced an enemy that could match their brutality with superior tactics. Jinwoo nodded slowly. Then we proceed as planned. Confederation expects us to fail, and the Vorthons expect us to run. Neither side understands what they're dealing with. Outside their window, the stars look peaceful and serene, but hidden. Among those distant lights, human warships were already moving into position, preparing to teach the galaxy a lesson about the dangers of underestimating humanity. The trap was being set, and nobody saw it coming. The Vorthon armada moved through space like a swarm of metal death, their massive ships blotting out the stars as they approached the Keto system. Commander Dexmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. This would be the largest fleet action in the war so far, designed to crush both the Confederation and their mysterious human allies in one decisive blow. Sensor contact, reported his tactical officer. Multiple Confederation vessels in the inner system, along with what appear to be human ships. Dexmore's yellow eyes gleamed with anticipation. Numbers. Approximately 30 vessels total, Commander. Much smaller than our force. The Vorthan fleet numbered over 200 ships, including 12 massive dreadnoughts. It was enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds, all focused on destroying the pitiful resistance ahead of them. They're running, called out another officer excitedly. On the main screen, the human and Confederation ships were indeed retreating deeper into the system. Their formations looked ragged and disorganized, as if panic had set in the moment they detected the approaching Vorthan armada. Dexmore laughed, a sound like grinding steel. So much for the mighty human allies. They're fleeing like scared children. But hidden among the asteroids of the Keto's belt, Admiral Sujin watched the Vorthan advance with cold calculation. Her flagship was completely invisible to enemy sensors, its hull coated with materials that absorbed every wavelength of detection beam. Round her, dozens of other human vessels waited in perfect silence. Decoy ships are performing well, reported Captain Dong Hyon from his position near the gas giant. Vorthons are taking the bait completely. Sujin nodded approvingly. The retreating ships weren't running in fear. They were leading the enemy exactly where she wanted them. Every movement had been planned and rehearsed, Vorthons thought. They were chasing frightened prey, but they were actually being herded into a kill zone. Enemy fleet is entering the corridor, announced her tactical officer. They're maintaining pursuit formation, no scouts flanking. Arrogant, Sujin murmured. They're so confident they're not even watching their sides. The Vorthan ships pushed deeper into the system, their attention focused entirely on the fleeing vessels ahead. They passed within kilometers of hidden human ships without detecting them. The asteroid field provided perfect cover, and human stealth technology was far more advanced than anyone realized. All units report ready, came the whispered communications from the scattered human fleet. Waiting for your signal. Sujin watched as the last Vorthan ship entered the trap. The enemy fleet was now stretched out in a long line, their supply ships and support vessels completely separated from their main battle group. It was exactly what she had hoped for. "Execute Gambit 7, she ordered quietly. The trap exploded into action with devastating precision. Human ships materialized from everywhere at once, from behind asteroids, from within gas clouds, from sensor shadows that shouldn't have existed. The Vorthans found themselves surrounded by enemies they had never seen coming. "Impossible," roared Thexmore as his flagship shuddered under coordinated human fire. Where did they come from? His bridge crew scrambled to respond, but the humans had planned for every contingency. Vorthon communications were jammed, their sensors were blinded by electronic warfare, and their weapons were being systematically disabled by precise strikes. "Sir, we're receiving multiple breach alerts," reported his tactical officer. "Human Marines are boarding our ships throughout the fleet." Thexmore couldn't believe what he was hearing. The humans had seemed so primitive, so weak. How were they executing such a sophisticated attack? On the Vorthon cruiser-destroyer's edge, Captain Wujin led his Marine squad through the alien corridors. With practiced efficiency, the Vorthan crew fought desperately, but they had never faced enemies who moved with such speed and coordination. "Bridge secured," Wujin reported over his comm unit, beginning data extraction. The human Marines weren't just capturing ships, they were stealing information. Every computer system they accessed was copied. Every tactical database was downloaded. The Vorthons would discover too late that their most secret military plans were now in human hands. "Enemy command ship is breaking formation," observed Sujin's tactical officer. "They're trying to retreat." "Let them," Sujin replied calmly. "We want survivors to carry the news back to their empire." The battle raged for 3 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Vorthons had walked into a perfectly executed ambush, and human tactical superiority was overwhelming. Ship after ship fell to coordinated attacks that exploited every weakness in Vorthan design. On Nexus Prime, the Confederation leadership watched the battle reports with growing amazement. They had expected their human allies to die bravely, but futilely instead. They were witnessing the systematic destruction of what everyone had believed was an invincible fleet. "How are they doing this?" whispered Dr. Kelshawn, staring at the tactical display. "They're not fighting like us," observed Commander Blixera. "They're fighting like predators." When the battle finally ended, nearly 70% of the Vorthan fleet had been destroyed or captured. The remainder limped away in disorder, their crews traumatized by their first taste of defeat. News of the human victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The species that everyone had dismissed as primitive weaklings had just accomplished the impossible. The Vorthan Empire, which had seemed unstoppable, was retreating in confusion and fear. But this was only the beginning. The humans had revealed their true nature, and the galaxy would never be the same. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Vorthan Empire, which had terrorized civilizations for 3 centuries, was retreating. Their mighty fleets were being destroyed by a species no one had ever heard of. In cantinas and trading posts throughout known space, beings whispered about the mad warriors from the Outer Rim who made the Vorthons flee in terror. General Minho stood on the observation deck of his command ship, watching the burning ruins of the Vorthon fortress world below. The planet had been considered impregnable, protected by massive orbital platforms and defended by the Empire's best troops. It had taken his forces exactly 18 hours to capture it. "Sir, we've secured the main command center," reported Major Subin over the CUM system. "The Vorthon defenders are requesting terms." "Negative," Minho replied coldly. "No terms. They showed no mercy to the species they conquered. They get none from us." The human assault on Kethver had been a masterpiece of military planning. While Vorthan commanders expected a frontal assault, human forces had infiltrated the planet weeks earlier. When the attack began, the defenders found their own weapons turned against them, their communications networks compromised, and their supply lines severed. But it wasn't just the tactical brilliance that shocked the galaxy. It was the sheer fury with which humans fought. They didn't just seek victory, they sought to completely destroy their enemy's ability to wage war, Captain Su-young led her special operations team through the underground tunnels of a Vorthan intelligence facility. Her mission wasn't just to gather information, it was to plant viruses in every computer system she could find. The Vorthons would discover too late that their most secure databases had been corrupted. Their fleet movements were being tracked, and their communications were being intercepted. "Package delivered," she reported as her team finished installing the last of their electronic warfare devices. "Every system in this facility will report false information to Vorthan Command for the next 6 months." "Outstanding," came the reply from intelligence headquarters. "Return to base. We have 17 more facilities to visit tonight." The Vorthons had built their empire on fear and overwhelming force. They had never faced an enemy that could match their brutality with superior intelligence and adaptability. Human commanders seemed to predict their moves before they made them, exploiting weaknesses the Vorthans didn't even know they had. On the bridge of the Vorthan battleship Eternal Destroyer, Admiral Kethfer stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His fleet had been chasing human ships for 3 days, but every time they thought they had cornered them, the humans would vanish like ghosts. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures," reported his sensor officer. "Multiple human vessels. Decloaking, ... They're everywhere." The humans had been leading the Vorthans into yet another trap. While the aliens focused on the ships they could see, dozens of others had been shadowing them invisibly. Now, the trap was closing, and there was nowhere to run. "All ships, emergency retreat," Kethfer ordered desperately. But it was too late. Human ships appeared from every direction, their weapons firing with precision that suggested they had been studying Vorthan ship designs for years. The Eternal Destroyer's shields collapsed under coordinated fire, and human marines were already cutting through the hull. Lieutenant Jin-Su led his boarding party through the alien corridors, his team moving with practiced efficiency. The Vorthon crew fought desperately, but they had never faced enemies who seemed to know their ship's layout better than they did. "How do they know where everything is?" gasped a wounded Vorthon officer. "We've been planning this for months," Jin-Su replied as he secured the bridge. "We know your ships better than you do." The truth was even more terrifying. Human intelligence had been gathering data on Vorthon technology and tactics for decades, long before the Confederation had called for help. They had been waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment had finally come. On Nexus Prime, the Confederation leadership watched the reports with growing amazement and concern. They had asked for allies, but what they had received was something far more dangerous, a species that waged war with an artistry that was both beautiful and terrifying. "They're not just defeating the Vorthons," observed Dr. Kelshin nervously. "They're studying them, learning from them, adapting their tactics in real time." High Chancellor Vexstar nodded grimly. "What have we unleashed?" The answer came from Admiral Su-jin herself when she addressed the Confederation Council via hologram. Her expression was calm, almost serene, despite the chaos she had orchestrated across dozens of star systems. "You asked for help against the Vorthans," she said simply. "We're giving you what you need. Complete victory." "But at what cost?" asked Counselor Miradan. The reports were receiving the level of destruction the Vorthons built their empire on terror, Su-jin interrupted. "They understood only strength. We're teaching them that there are predators in this galaxy far more dangerous than they ever imagined." Other species throughout the galaxy were beginning to reassess their assumptions about humanity. The diplomatic smiles and peaceful words now seemed like masks hiding something far more primal and dangerous. Behind their civilized exterior lay capacity for warfare that made them the most terrifying enemies in known space. The Vorthan Empire was learning this lesson the hard way, one destroyed fleet at a time. The final confrontation came at Vorth Prime, the Empire's homeworld that had ruled the galaxy through terror for 3 centuries. The planet that had once been untouchable now cowered beneath failing defensive shields as the human fleet took position in orbit above. Admiral Su-jin stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the proud Vorthan capital through the main view screen. The city-sized orbital platforms that had once seemed invincible were now burning wrecks, their weapons silenced by precise human strikes. Below on the planet's surface, General Minho's ground forces had surrounded the Imperial Palace. There. Broadcasting on all channels, reported Communications Officer Hyanwu, the Vorthon High Command is requesting immediate negotiations. Sujin's expression remained calm, but her eyes were cold as winter stars. Put them through. The holographic image of the Vorthon leadership appeared on the bridge. These beings had once terrorized half the galaxy, their mere presence enough to make entire species surrender without a fight. Now they looked broken, their proud bearing replaced by the hollow stare of absolute defeat. Emperor Vorthkal himself stepped forward, his massive form trembling with barely controlled fear. His yellow eyes, which had once looked upon the destruction of countless worlds with satisfaction, now pleaded for mercy. We surrender, he managed to say, his voice cracking. We yield to your terms. Unconditional surrender, Sujin asked quietly. Yes, complete and unconditional. We will submit to whatever judgment you impose. The words echoed across the bridge. The Vorthon Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just months earlier, was begging for mercy from a species they had dismissed as primitive weaklings. Down on the planet's surface, General Minho walked through. The Imperial Palace with a small escort, the magnificent halls that had once displayed the treasures of conquered worlds now stood empty. Their guards fled or dead. In the throne room, he found what he was looking for, the memorial wall. The wall displayed the names of every species the Vorthons had destroyed, carved in stone as a monument to their empire's power. Hundreds of civilizations, billions of beings, entire cultures erased from existence. Minho stood before it in silence, thinking of all the worlds that would never see justice. Sir, called Major Subin from behind him, we've secured the palace. Archives, the records of every atrocity, every genocide, every act of terror. It's all here. Good, Minho replied. The galaxy needs to know what really happened to all those missing species. Back in orbit, Sujin was addressing the assembled representatives of dozens of species who had come to witness the end of the Vorthon Empire. The great conference hall on Nexus Prime was packed with beings who had lived in fear for generations, hardly daring to believe that their nightmare was finally over. The war is ended, she announced. The Vorthon Empire no longer exists. Fleets are destroyed, their leadership captured, their ability to wage war eliminated. A cheer went up from the assembled delegates, but Sujin raised her hand for silence. However, she continued, the peace we have won must be protected. The galaxy has learned that evil can grow unchecked when good beings choose to do nothing. This cannot be allowed to happen again. Ambassador Jinwu stepped forward to address the crowd. His gentle demeanor seemed unchanged from their first meeting, but everyone now knew what lay beneath that peaceful exterior. Humanity seeks peace, he said, his voice carrying across the hall. But we have learned that peace is not given freely. It must be protected, defended, and when necessary, fought for with everything we have. The representatives nodded in understanding. They had called for allies in their darkest hour and received something far more valuable. Guardians, who would ensure that no empire would ever again terrorize the innocent with impunity. Chancellor Vexstar stood to speak for the Confederation. The galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You have given us not just victory, but hope for the future. The debt is already paid, Sujin replied. You gave us the chance to do what was right. That is payment enough. But privately, the alien leaders wondered what they had truly unleashed. The humans had proven that appearances could be deceiving, that behind their diplomatic smiles lay a capacity for warfare that was both magnificent and terrifying. They were the most dangerous allies imaginable, and the most fearsome enemies. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to reshape itself around this new reality. The Vorthon territories were divided among the liberated species, their war. Criminals put on trial, their military technology destroyed. The Confederation emerged as a major power, protected by their human allies who had proven their worth in the crucible of total war. Other species approached humanity with new respect and caution. Trade agreements were signed, defensive pacts were negotiated, and cultural exchanges were established. But everyone understood the unspoken truth. Humanity was now the galaxy's apex predator. Their protection came with the implicit promise of swift and terrible retribution for anyone who threatened the peace. The humans had taught the galaxy a lesson that would not soon be forgotten. They had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from size or technology, but from the willingness to stand up to evil, no matter the cost. The age of Vorth and terror was over. The age of human guardianship had begun.